The empire that died with its king. History remembers few names as luminous as Alexander the Great. He conquered more of the known world than any man before him, ruling lands from Greece to India. He defeated empires that had stood for centuries. He united cultures, spread ideas, and carved his name into legend. And then, suddenly, he died. At just 32 years old, Alexander's empire collapsed almost as quickly as it had risen. How could something so vast, so powerful, and so awe-inspiring crumble overnight? How could the man who dreamed of uniting the world leave behind chaos instead? Today, we unravel that question, not as a simple story of conquest, but as a timeless lesson about power, ambition, and the limits of human greatness. 1. The Meteor King. Alexander wasn't born into mediocrity. He was the son of King Philip II of Macedon, a brilliant military reformer who transformed Macedonia from a rugged backwater into a disciplined superpower, and his mother, Olympias, filled his head with divine destiny. She told him he was descended from Achilles, the Greek hero, and perhaps even the son of Zeus himself. From a young age, Alexander believed he wasn't just meant to rule, he was meant to transcend humanity itself. Tutored by Aristotle, Alexander learned philosophy, science, and the ideals of Greek civilization. But his real education came on the battlefield. When his father was assassinated in 336 BCE, the 20-year-old Alexander inherited the throne and immediately began his campaign to conquer the Persian Empire. Over the next decade, Alexander would march 20,000 miles, win every major battle he fought, and build an empire spanning 3 continents. He became more than a man. He became a living god, adored by some, feared by others. But like every star that burns too brightly, his brilliance carried the seeds of destruction. 2. An empire built on personality, not structure. Alexander's empire was unlike any before it. He didn't just conquer, he absorbed. Everywhere he went, he adopted local customs, married local nobility, and appointed Persian administrators to govern newly conquered lands. In theory, this was visionary, a blending of East and West. In reality, it was unstable, because Alexander's empire was personal. It existed because of him, not because of a system. There were no institutions, no succession plan, no bureaucracy that could function without his charisma at the center. To the Greeks and Macedonians, Alexander was their king. To the Persians, he was the divine successor to Darius. To his generals, he was the sun around which their ambitions orbited. And when the sun disappears, everything falls into darkness. 3. The mysterious death in Babylon. In June of 323 BCE, Alexander fell ill in the city of Babylon. Some accounts say it began with a fever after a night of heavy drinking. Others claim poison. For days, he drifted between consciousness and delirium, unable to speak but fully aware. According to legend, as he lay dying, his generals asked who would inherit his vast empire. He whispered only 3 words: "To the strongest." Whether or not he truly said those words doesn't matter. They defined what came next. Alexander's sudden death was not just the death of a man. It was the death of a system. There was no heir capable of filling his place. His wife, Roxana, was pregnant with his son, and his half-brother Philip Aridaeus was mentally unfit to rule. The generals, the men who had marched with him across continents, suddenly found themselves facing a question even Alexander couldn't answer. Who rules the world when the god is gone? 4. The War of the Successors. The men who had once been bound by loyalty now turned on one another. They called themselves the Diadochi, the successors. At first, they pretended unity. They ruled in the name of Alexander's heirs, Philip III and the infant Alexander IV. But everyone knew it was an illusion. The empire was divided like loot after a robbery. Ptolemy took Egypt. Seleucus claimed Persia and Mesopotamia. Antigonus seized Anatolia. Cassander held Macedonia and Greece. Lysimachus took Thrace. Within a few years, alliances shifted, betrayals erupted, and entire armies were slaughtered by men who had once shared campfires. For nearly 40 years, the ancient world descended into chaos, as the generals fought not to preserve Alexander's empire, but to inherit his glory. By 280 BCE, all of Alexander's legitimate heirs were dead, murdered in the struggle for power. The dream of a united world had ended in blood. 5. The curse of distance and diversity. Even without civil war, Alexander's empire may never have lasted. It was simply too vast, too diverse, and too dependent on his personal presence. From Greece to India stretched deserts, mountains, and cultures that shared no common language, religion, or administration. Alexander had tried to unite them through Hellenization, spreading Greek culture and merging it with Eastern traditions. He encouraged intermarriage, trained Persian troops in Greek warfare, and founded over 20 cities named Alexandria. But many of his Macedonian soldiers saw this as betrayal. They resented the Persian robes he wore and the foreign customs he adopted. At one point, his troops mutinied, exhausted, homesick, and furious that their king now seemed more Persian than Greek. In truth, Alexander was trying to build something new, a hybrid civilization. But without him to enforce it, that fragile fusion unraveled. The East and West reverted to their own worlds, bound only loosely by culture, not loyalty. 6. The rise of the Hellenistic kingdoms. Out of the ashes of Alexander's empire arose three great powers, the Hellenistic kingdoms. The Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, ruled by Ptolemy and his descendants, including the famous Cleopatra. The Seleucid Empire, stretching from Syria to Persia, blending Greek and Eastern traditions. The Antigonid kingdom in Macedonia and Greece. Each claimed to be the true continuation of Alexander's legacy, but none could claim his unity. Still, his influence endured. Greek became the language of science, art, and diplomacy across the ancient world. New cities became centers of learning, especially Alexandria, whose library would preserve human knowledge for centuries. Even Rome, which would later conquer the Mediterranean, absorbed Greek philosophy, science, and art, all of it born from Alexander's conquests. His empire died, but his cultural revolution did not. 7. The problem of the hero. Why did Alexander's empire fall? Because it was built around one man. The Greeks called him Megas Alexandros, Alexander the Great. But greatness is fragile when it depends on charisma instead of structure. Alexander's genius in battle was unmatched, but he never learned the art of succession. He left no administrative system strong enough to survive him, no laws to bind his empire, and no clear heir to follow in his footsteps. His power was absolute, but personal, and personal empires die with their founders. The irony is almost poetic. Alexander sought to make himself immortal through conquest, but by tying his empire to his own identity, he ensured it would die when he did. 8. The lessons of collapse. There's a reason later empires, especially Rome, studied Alexander closely. Rome admired his ambition, but rejected his methods. The Romans built systems, laws, senates, citizenship, bureaucracy. They knew that no single man, no matter how brilliant, could hold an empire together forever. Rome learned from Alexander that greatness must evolve from personality to institution, from myth to mechanism. Even in modern times, Alexander's story carries a warning for powerful nations and charismatic leaders. Empires that rise too quickly, led by visionaries without successors or systems, almost always fall the same way, suddenly, completely, and inevitably. 9. The immortal legacy. Yet, It would be wrong to say Alexander's empire truly died. In another sense, it became eternal, because empires can collapse politically, but live on culturally. Alexander's conquests spread Greek ideas across the world, influencing everything from Indian art to Persian astronomy. The very concept of a cosmopolitan world, a world united by shared language and ideas, came from his dream. He was gone, but his vision lived in the Hellenistic age, the Roman Empire, and even the European Enlightenment. In this way, Alexander achieved something no mere conqueror could. He conquered time. 10. The eternal question. So why did Alexander's empire fall? Because no empire can outlive the man who embodies it, unless it learns to become something greater than him. Alexander united the world by sheer force of will. But when that will vanished, the empire dissolved into fragments. Still, his legacy endures. In every library, every scientific pursuit, every fusion of East and West, he changed the direction of human history not through governance, but through imagination. In the end, Alexander's empire teaches us that even collapse can be a kind of creation. From chaos came culture, from destruction came discovery. Perhaps the empire that fell was only the beginning, a spark that ignited the modern world. The empire of Alexander the Great lasted barely a generation, but his dream of a world beyond borders, beyond divisions, bound by knowledge and curiosity, continues to echo through time. He reminds us that greatness and fragility often walk hand in hand, and that sometimes, when empires fall, civilizations begin. Subscribe to Timeless Questions channel to receive more thought-provoking content about philosophy, human nature, and the mysteries of existence.